Hello everyone. I was hoping that my last Call of Duty recording would be the absolute last one. My hope back then was that people would be able to learn for themselves, and it turned out that was not the case. I feel a need to do another recording in the hopes that this will reach people and help them understand Warzone. In my opinion, it is good to know the mechanics and numbers involved with Call of Duty. It's more important for Warzone than it is multiplayer due to the fact that there's more things going on. To show you why, let's go ahead and start with the basics. In Call of Duty, every gun has a base range value, aim down sight time, time to kill, RPM, and a bunch of other things going on. Time to kill is the bullet damage plus RPM. It's factoring in two different numbers. Time to kill will only change if you are shooting a target outside of the gun's effective range, or if said target happens to have armor plates, in the case of Warzone. This is something that you would have to look at a gun guide for, and Exclusive Ace does a very good job of that. I can tell you right now that based on my experiences with talking to pros and some of the big streamers, they only look at the positives and negatives on the attachment pages itself. They are not going to be looking at this stuff. That is not an accurate way to figure out the gun. Those bar stats down at the bottom, not accurate at all. In short, the meta is driven by ignorance. That's really all it is. If you don't want to get involved with this kind of stuff, that's your call. But please make sure that you have a disclaimer somewhere. When you're a pro or a big streamer, people are going to copy your builds because you're successful. That's what they do. It happens in games other than Call of Duty. Without that disclaimer, you are effectively adding to the problem. But I digress. Let's go ahead and start with the Kilo and Grau, then we'll move on to the M4. The Grau is one of the meta weapons, so I feel that this is a very good place to start. You can see that I've had the Kilo up on my screen, and we'll come back to that, but let's go ahead and look at the Grau. This is the Grau range chart according to Ace, and you can see that I have it up in my slide here. He did say that he mislabeled things in here, and it's pretty easy to tell which ones those are. The Archangel is the longest range barrel. The next one after that's the Nexus. So this Nexus should be replaced with the Zen Mark II, because the Zen Mark II is the next longest range barrel after the base barrel. So it's pretty easy to see that this bottom bar is the Zen, the middle bar is the Nexus, and the Archangels after that. So you can see that up to about 48 meters, the Archangel has a time to kill of 640 milliseconds if shooting 3 armor plates. If you're shooting at a target beyond this yellow line and you're hitting it in the blue line, then the blue line should be at or around 720 milliseconds time to kill. That's how big of a jump there is in time to kill when you're shooting outside of the effective range. Obviously you can do it, but it's just not going to be the most efficient way of doing it. Now let's go back to the Kilo. The Kilo has a bit faster of a time to kill, and you'll notice that while its yellow bar is a little bit shorter than the Grau, it does have a better time to kill. Notice it has 616 millisecond time to kill on 3 armor plates in the yellow bar. On the blue bar, it's 693 milliseconds. So let's go back to the Grau. The Grau's blue is 720. That means even if the Kilo is firing at a target outside of its effective range, it will still have a better time to kill than the Grau. Of course, that's just the numbers, so let's look at the recoil now. Here's the kilo's recoil pattern. You can see that it's very, very tight. With a 16-inch barrel, it just gets even tighter. There's really not a need to go beyond the 16.6-inch SOCOM barrel. However, if you want to do the 19-inch Prowler, that is your decision. Now, going over here to the Grau, I've decided to use the comparison of the Nexus for this. You'll notice that the Nexus isn't as tight as the Kilo. The Kilo stays in a nice circle after it jumps up a little bit. The Grau is just straight up. While one can argue that vertical recoil is a lot easier to control because all you do is point down, you have to appreciate the fact that this stays pretty tight, all things considered. Whereas this really doesn't. I mean, yeah, it makes the dots tighter as it goes up in a line, but the line is pretty long. Whereas the Kilo's really isn't. It goes up just a little bit and then stays right here in this nice, tight little grouping. As you can see, just based on numbers and looking at the recoil patterns, there is definitely a difference between the Kilo and Grau. Now, not everybody's going to like the Kilo, and I get that, but my point is this. The Kilo is a better long-range AR than the Grau on a numbers and recoil level. This is how easy it was to just look at the meta and be like, okay, this is what's going on. But yeah, let's go ahead and look at the damage profiles just so we can see the if there's any differences there. You'll notice that the bullet damage and headshot multiplier are the exact same. Oh wait, except Kilo has slightly more headshot damage by 1, but yeah, so, and of course there's going to be an RPM difference between the two, but you can see that the Kilo does definitely do some work. As you can see, this furthers my point of that the meta is based on ignorance. Now, because people are always curious about the Grau and M4, we're going to have to switch to this slide. The way I structured my most recent Google document on Warzone, and of course all the slides, is I did it by the guns that I would recommend, and then by the guns I wouldn't recommend. Anything under additional builds is stuff that I wouldn't normally recommend. I only go to that point if there's some sort of weird player preference going on. But let's go ahead and look in here, and you'll see I have the M4 down here. Alright, so M4 actually got a nerf in Season 2. You can see that its range was changed from here to here. As far as I can tell, that range nerf is present in Warzone. I don't think that they reverted back to its older range value for Warzone, though they should have. So you can see that this range bar is actually based on the pre-patch version, not the post-patch. But you can see that based on the two slides, the post-patch will bring it to this red line right here. So it lops off that chunk right there, which means that you're going to have to lop off about that much here. So that means we can guesstimate that the M16 barrel brings it down to about 38 meters effective range, and this brings it down to about 33 or 32 effective meter range. The M4's damage profile is going to be 576 millisecond time to kill on 3 armor plates for the yellow and 648 milliseconds on blue. That means that the M4 is not going to be very good at range, and it's going to be significantly slower than the Grau at that given point when it reaches this blue line. The M4, just like the Grau, is popular because it's a low skill weapon. It doesn't require you to learn recoil control, and for that matter, it just kills when you want it to. But to show you just how big of a difference there is in these metaguns, let's go ahead and look at what I think is the best automatic AR, and that's going to be the Ram. The RAM did not receive a nerf in any shape or form as far as I can tell. It's been the same since it was introduced. Now look at this. The yellow bar for the XRK Ranger is going to be at about 38 meters. So yes, while it is going to be shorter ranged than the Grau or Kilo, it will make up for it in time to kill. The yellow bar is going to be 544 millisecond time to kill. The blue should be at around 612 milliseconds time to kill. Remember, the Kilo's yellow bar range is going to be 616 milliseconds time to kill. That means the RAM, even outside of its effective range, is going to be faster at killing than the Grau or Kilo, and even the M4. My reason for thinking that the RAM is going to be your best automatic AR of Warzone is not just in these numbers, it's also in the fact that I think it's one of the most versatile weapons of the game. To better show that, we're going to go back and open my SMG chart. Another meta weapon that's been popping up for some weird reason is the MP7. So let's look at this. The MP7's range is less than the MP5's at the base. You'll see that here and here. Notice that the MP5's effective range, which is the green bar this time, is 12.5 meters. MP7's is less than 12.5 meters. That's terrible. You need a barrel to get that up to 12.5 meter range. And then it has a lot of multicolored bars going on here. But yes, so the MP7's effective range damage, or well, TTK, is 558 milliseconds. Remember, the RAM's is 544. That means the RAM can kill faster than the MP7 while still maintaining a better range. Look at this. If you try hitting in the blue range, that's going to be 620 milliseconds. And it's very short in comparison to the RAM. The RAM was going all the way out to 50 meters on its blue range. Here, we'll even go right back to it so you can see that. Look at that. The blue range on the XRK Ranger is all the way past 50 meters. That's insane. Now, yes, the RAM is not going to be as nearly as mobile as, say, the MP7, but I would like to think that it's the next best thing in Warzone when it comes to a CQC weapon. The RAM is 267 millisecond standard sprint out time, and I believe the MP7's is 133. What that means is that it's a measurement of how fast your gun is ready after leaving a sprint. For the MP7, it takes 133 milliseconds to get ready, I think it is, and for the RAM, it's 267. There's a significant difference in that particular number, but looking at the ranges themselves, or the movements percentages themselves, I think the MP7's is 98%. It's either 98 or 99, and the RAM's is 95%. You can put a shorter barrel on the RAM if absolutely needed to get a little bit extra speed, but other than that, it sits pretty close to the MP7, at least on the base. Now, that's just the base value. When you start putting in the strikes and recon barrels, that's obviously going to change. The mobility will go down in terms of the percent movement speed. So, yes, while the RAM is a little bit slower than the MP7, I think that if it's modded correctly, it can be treated like an SMG or an AR. For that reason, I think that the RAM is the best AR because of how flexible it is. And, of course, how friendly it is. The recoil isn't friendly itself to most people when they first get the RAM, and that's normal of most weapons. Most weapons will have awful handling at the very start, but once you start putting attachments on the RAM, it can turn itself into any number of roles, and I think that the recoil is pretty manageable. If you're not good at recoil control, then I would recommend doing an AR-like build, which will use the XRK Ranger. That's going to be the longest barrel available to the RAM. You can see here that it does make this line a little bit shorter and a little bit straighter. It's a much more predictable recoil pattern with the XRK Ranger. If you're running with your SMG build, though, I would recommend a Muzzle Brake. That will flatten out these edges and make it a little bit more straight when it's going up. Although you could use the Compensator as well, but that won't flatten out these bullets going off to the side. It's only going to affect this upper port of it. As you can see, in just a few minutes, I have broken down the meta and shown on a numbers level that there are better guns. To finish this off, let me go ahead and talk about one last thing when it comes to weapons and their attachments. I think one of the most unfair things of Warzone is people will pick up a gun and then just use it the way it's not supposed to. They realize it's not working for them, throw away and call it garbage. One of the guns that receives this treatment the most, I think, is the AK-47. Yes, the AK-47 does have a lot of recoil without any attachments, but it's perfectly manageable. The mistake I see people doing over and over again is they'll pick up the AK and treat it like an LMG. Just hold down the trigger and spray it. That's not how you use the AK. The AK needs to be fired in small bursts, maybe 2 to 3 bullets at a time. After you fire 2 or 3 bullets, you let go of the trigger and you let the recoil reset. That's how you work the AK. And as a matter of fact, that is what you really should be doing with a lot of guns. Plus or minus a few like the Kilo, Grau, or the other ones that have stupid low recoil. That'll just make you a lot more accurate and ensure that you're not using too many bullets. I noticed that the RAM is under the same treatment. This is probably why we're not seeing more of the RAM in Warzone. Sandstorm appears to be the blueprint that pops up the most. Sandstorm does not have the XRK Ranger barrel as far as I can tell, nor a muzzle brake. So of course its recoil is going to be everywhere, and people who don't understand that the recoil pattern for the RAM is unique is going to have a rough time. So what I'm trying to say here is that don't judge a gun based on the picked up versions, because they're not going to be built well. You also need a lot more skill to use certain guns. If you can spend the time to get those basic skills in, then you are going to be ahead of the meta itself, because they're just going to follow each other. They're not going to learn this stuff, and you can get yourself an advantage for the low price of just learning. For free. That's all you gotta do to beat the meta, is outsmart them and figure out what gun works for you within the number set that's superior to it. With that said, if you are going to be using a gun, keep in mind that attachments for each gun vary. However, the attachments that are consistent throughout all guns is going to be the Muzzle Brake and Compensator. They will be the strongest recoil attachments for those categories. Muzzle Brake is horizontal, and Compensator is vertical. For the AK, you're going to want Compensator because obviously it's a vertical, mostly pattern, as you can see here. And in the Ram's case, it's going to be Muzzle Brake. So this goes to show that you really need to understand the gun to know which attachments are supposed to go on it. While we're on attachments, actually let me go ahead and cover the next meta, which is Commando Foregrip. Commando Foregrip I've seen on so many weapons, and I just don't agree with it. The problem with Commando Foregrip is that it lowers your movement speed by 2 to 3%. It may not seem like a big percentage by itself, but once you start adding in the longer barrels, which in most cases are minus 4%, then it really starts to get slow for you. That's not even counting the bigger magazines. So when I build ARs for my documents, I try to stay above or at 90% movement speed. That's because I'm trying to strike a balance with mobility, ADS time, range, and a few other factors. If I'm going to be dropping below 90%, then I'm going to be looking at an LMG. At that point, that's what the LMGs are for. If you really want a weapon that's super long ranged and can just beam people from across the map, that's what LMGs are for when it comes to automatics. So yeah. But yeah, Commando Foregrip by itself is horizontal recoil control, and it really isn't that much. Not to justify the 2 to 3% movement speed reduction. If you are going to be using a horizontal recoil reduction, I would say get the Ranger Foregrip. At least the Ranger Foregrip does come with some vertical recoil control as well. It will lower your ADS time, but most guns are able to work around that because their ADS time is so fast. Or at least the ADS time doesn't matter with the ranges involved. But yeah, that's really all I have to say on the meta and stuff, but I hope that I explained this all well enough, and if I didn't, then my latest Google document is going to be linked in the description, and you can learn from that and try some builds from there. But thanks for listening.